but on. Well, hello. Y'all are stuck with me one more time at least. As usual, it is always an honor and pleasure to be here with you all. I enjoy it greatly. And today, we're going to explore some more stars. Every day that I play with it, the list gets bigger. The other day, I just found 2 more. So I'm up to almost 60. So you can't do 60 people in an hour. So this is part 2. And when Brian speaks with y'all a little bit later on, there might be part 3 and part 4. So this is Shining Stars, Hopewell, Prince George, and Dinwiddie. And that's me. This first group is the Dinwiddie Colored Quartet. They began performing in 1898 and performed together until 1904. And what's interesting about them is that they were students at the John A. Dix School in Dinwiddie County. Now that was the first colored high school in Dinwiddie County. What's interesting about it is it was a private school. So there was a little bit of tuition involved. And the gentleman that you saw in the quartet didn't even live in Dinwiddie. Students traveled as far away as New York and Pennsylvania and other states to go to the John A. Dix School because they were provided with such a fine education. The Dinwiddie Colored Quartet was put together to make money to help other students pay their tuition. So they traveled around and sang at different churches up north and down south. So what happened is when they did these concerts, the concerts were free. But they passed the plate. And in the newspapers you hear collections of silver being made to the John A. Dix School. Well, someone heard them in New York and decided they were absolutely marvelous. So they took a chance. And vinyl records were just coming out. Records had been recorded on wax cores. They were the first colored group recorded on a vinyl record. They were their voices were incredible. Their influence spanned generations. In 1952, they had been long disbanded. But on Ed Sullivan's show, before it became Ed Sullivan, it was the Toast of the Town. And he had on Mahalia Jackson, Muddy Waters, many of the great African-American artists. And what they did was played the Dinwiddie Colored Quartet's music and said that the Dinwiddie Colored Quartet opened the doors for them all. Sam Pinkleton. Sam was born here in Hopewell. He is the son of Kim Kalos Pinkleton and the grandson of Mary Kalos. Sam attended Hopewell Public Schools and then later went on to attend the Governor's School. At the Governor's School, he was very interested in music, but when he attended college in New York, he went on to study directing and many other things. So Sam has been up in New York and various other places working on plays. And then in 2017, he took a step even further. He done something he had never done before. He became a choreographer, and he choreographed Natasha and the Great Comet. That Broadway play was nominated for many, many Tonys. So he was a Tony nominee. Sam teaches theater in upstate New York and lives on a large farm with his partner and many, many animals that he rescues. Currently, just opened in July, he is directing a play called Oh Mary. Now, Oh Mary is a comedy. What it centers around is several weeks before Lincoln is assassinated, his life with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. But Mary Todd Lincoln is very tired of everything and feels that nobody is paying her any attention. So Mary Todd Lincoln wants to go back to her old life as a cabaret singer and dancer. Well, poor Mr. Lincoln, he always spent most of his life trying to appease Mary. So he goes out and hires a professional person, actor, to get Mary back on the stage and keep her happy. So this entire play is based around that. And so that is what Sam is doing now. And at a very young age of about 38 years old, Sam has made a huge name for himself on Broadway. Joseph Cotton. Now, Joseph Cotton was born in Petersburg in 1905. Now, he came from a pretty wealthy family, well-known family. And as you all know, he became a legendary actor in his own right. But what you may not know is what Joseph Cotton's connection is to Hopewell. These are just a few of his films. One of the very, very famous one, Citizen Kane. He visited Hopewell frequently, and when the radio station first opened, he would go and talk on the radio with that wonderful voice of his and commentate, and even he did a few yacht race commentaries here in town. But why would Joseph Cotton come to Hopewell? Well, for many years I had heard that Fred Hummel's wife of the paper mill was his sister. Well, I investigated and investigated, and no, I never could find out that he even had a sister. But what Mrs. Hummel was to him was his favorite aunt. Now, Mrs. Hummel was adventurous. You've heard me speak about her before as flying airplanes. You see her hunting. She also fished. So can you imagine a young boy who has a doting aunt who allows him to fly in a plane, hunt and fish ducks, and most of the time he doesn't have to go home and tell Mama and Daddy about it. Joseph Cotton continued to regularly visit Hopewell and the Hummel family and other families that he knew here in Hopewell until the Hummels moved to Richmond. And then he was a frequent visitor to them while they were in Richmond. George Elder told me that he went to visit the Hummels one time and walked in the front door, and there sat Joseph Cotton. So Joseph Cotton spent a great deal of his young years growing up, being adventurous right here in Hopewell. Tequila Connors. She graduated from Hopewell High School. Very, very bright young woman. She has started a business. She's an entrepreneur down in Newport News that helps inspire young authors. But on top of all of that, she is an accomplished author. She writes poetry, novels, various other forms of literature, and this couple of them have been very, very good sellers, especially The Seed. This is her latest, Love is Air. It's absolutely wonderful. And as you can see by looking at her, she is also a dancer in local theater and a fitness instructor. She often visits the schools here in Hopewell and talks to them about the children, about writing books, and occasionally does some fitness programs here. She is a star. Did any of you know Buford Ashworth? This is one of Buford Ashworth's sons, Jody Ashworth. Jody was born right here in Hopewell, and he graduated from Hopewell High School, went to VCU. His first performance was a solo, The Little Drummer Boy, in his hometown church here in town. In his early days, his music was rooted in the church, and he had a heartfelt devotion to Christ. So he moved on and performed with different groups. Jody has performed in the Hollywood Bowl. He's performed all over the country. He's performed with Bill Murray, Reba McEntire, Debbie Gibson, Scott Bakula, Jessica Biel, and many others. He was a star on the soap opera The Guiding Light. He also has done voiceovers, not only in this country, but for films for other countries. But I think one of his big accomplishments, how many of you know the Trans-Siberian Orchestra? Did you know that Hopewell's own Jody Ashworth on so many of their Christmas albums was the lead vocalist, and his vocals are absolutely wonderful. So if you get a chance, listen to the Trans-Siberian records, especially during Christmas, and you will hear a voice from Hopewell. Ed Hatch. Ed Hatch was born here in Hopewell. His grandparents had run a small store down Route 10 in Prince George. He graduated from Hopewell High School, attended Richard Bland, and later on VCU, always with an interest in art. He always enjoyed, he started very early on painting purple marlins in his parents' yard. So he's always been interested in wildlife and scenic things. He loves to see clouds and paint them and paint the wildlife. Ed Hatch, this is his little gallery down the road near Spring Grove, and it's quite lovely. When he came out of college, he became a commercial artist for about 3 or 4 years, and then he decided that that wasn't his cup of tea, so he decided that he would be a full-time artist. Ed Hatch has won numerous awards. Even the Governor's Award presented by Gerald Blouses. You all have heard him speak here a couple of times and seen his artwork in many places. But one of the very unusual places for his artwork is the United States Embassy in Kosovo. Ed Hatch has 4 paintings on display in that embassy as part of the art in the embassies of the U.S. Department of State. I can't think of much more that you could be proud of than to have your artwork displayed in an American embassy. So we should be very proud that Ed Hatch is keeping up with our rivers, our streams, and our wildlife. And right here we have him. The legendary one. How many of you knew Sid Hudson? When I was back in my wilder days, I'm wild enough, I worked at the Moose Lodge. And Sid Hudson and Donna Meade played frequently at the Moose Lodge. They got married, Sid Hudson and Donna Meade, and moved to Nashville. Sid Hudson was known as the real telemonster and one of the greatest hybrid pickers in the world. Sid and Donna lived in Nashville. Donna became a pretty noted solo artist. Sid went on the road. Sid was on the road for 13 years as Barbara Mandrell's guitarist and one of her vocalists. Well, Donna Meade and Sid Hudson divorced. And the rest is kind of legendary. Donna married Jimmy Dean, the Sausage King. Sid continued to travel with Donna Barbara Mandrell until that horrible car accident, and she basically retired. Sid sort of semi-retired, but he didn't quite give up music altogether. With James Respis in 1991, Sid tried to open a version of the Grand Ole Opry in Williamsburg. It was called the Old Dominion Opry. Sid and his group were the house band. They served food, and on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, big entertainers came in. This Opry stayed open until 1997. But once again, being in a band 7 nights a week, in your place of business, getting everything straight, you have a family at home, it starts to wear on you. So Sid retired they sold this business. Sid kind of semi-retired from music. He went into the real estate business, but his new side gig became go-kart racing. He loved it. He raced at Southside and other small tracks around the area. But he continued to play sometimes and entered competitions and won many of them. And as you can see, this is Sid in the early days with the big afro. This is Sid with some of his trophies. So Sid led a full life. Unfortunately, we lost Sid in 2018, but he was greatly honored by his peers in Nashville. He had played with Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and numerous other great stars. So a truly great musician from right here in Hopewell. My last person is kind of personal. James Woods. James Woods was not born in Hopewell, but from the time he was 5 years old to the time he was about 12 years old, he and his family lived here in Hopewell. His father, Gale Woods, was an intelligence officer at Fort Lee, and his mother ran a daycare. So James Woods is here in Hopewell, and he attends Woodlawn School because back then, Hopewell still kind of stopped at the monument. We were just beginning to annex out in that area. And this is the house at 509 Miles Avenue where James Woods and his family lived while he was attending Woodlawn School. He participated in school plays. James Woods is exceptionally brilliant. He went to MIT for 3 years, but the acting bug had bitten him. He has been nominated for multiple Academy Awards, won Tony Awards, and Emmy Awards. He worked on the film Oppenheimer, but he had to stay kind of quiet about it, excuse me, because of his politics. He's ultimately conservative and very outspoken about it. But what happened to me with James Woods happened about 20 years ago. Whoops, back. I was working at the old building at the front desk, and a fairly tall gentleman in regular jeans and some cowboy boots, denim shirt, big Ray-Ban sunglasses walked in with his mother. Well, he came to the front desk and he said, I need somebody that can help me because I used to live in Hopewell, but my mother has forgotten where we lived and where the school was, so who can help me? And I said, well, I think I can. So I told him, I said, you probably went to Woodlawn. I dug up the old-fashioned way, a city directory, and found where the house was and gave him the address. And back then, the microfilm was you kind of had to know what you were looking for or you weren't going to find it, which things are a lot different now. But I told him that I would look around through those years, especially around Christmas time, because the children used to write letters to Santa Claus. So the next thing I know, everybody in the whole library is coming up to this man. And they're all going, let me shake your hand, let me shake your hand. And even the director runs out and he says, let me shake your hand. And I'm looking at all these people like they have lost their daggone mind. Why are you bothering this man and his mama? So Chuck, who was the director at the time, says, Jeanie, it's James Woods. Aren't you like starstruck? And I'm like, well, not really. And I said, I treat everybody the same way. So I thought they'd all lost their minds. So then I said, let me do this work for you, and I will mail it to you when I find it. So I asked him his name. And he said, my name is James Woods. I'm like, oh gosh. These people weren't crazy. I'm sorry, they were being rude, but it's okay. I said, and what's your address, Mr. Woods? And it came out such and such in Hollywood. And I'm like, oh gosh. Well, anyway, he left with his mother, and they traveled and saw the old Woodlawn School and went and saw the house. And I found, by looking, what I could find back then and sent it to him in Hollywood. And he wrote me a nice letter about how much he had enjoyed it and how many memories it brought it back. And it reminded me a little bit of Jimmy Micklem when he talked about the Woodlawn Boys, because he talked about the Woodlawn Boys too, how rough and tumble they were. Well, this is not all, because there's still like 45 more. So I'm going to let Brian come up and tell you a little bit about that project. And so just wanted to tell y'all that next year, good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we'll begin with the lady who loved the most dangerous man in the world. And we'll conclude with a little bit of murder mysteries and mayhem. And thank you all so very much.